Well, hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to Live at 5. I stream live at 5 o'clock every day on this channel, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Generally on Fridays, we go over to my second channel, Actively Unwoke, for a stream there. And then on Saturdays, I rest. Now, this week is going to be a little bit wonky. On Wednesday, we are actually going to start streaming at 6:15. And the reason we're streaming at 6:15 instead of 5 o'clock on Wednesday is because we are doing our next spy stream. Spy stream is when we watch a woke presentation live, and sometimes I have to sign up like covertly for these things. Like I have to sign up for the webinar under one of my many stock accounts that my haters hate that I have oh so very much. But we get into the presentation and then I stream it live on my channel and we watch what the enemy is saying. And it just so happens this Wednesday at 6:30, we are going to be infiltrating a webinar from the Center for Anti-Racist Education that is going to be training teachers about how to infuse anti-racism into their curriculum. Because, of course, they claim that critical race theory is not in schools, but then they're giving whole webinars about how they can teach critical race theory in schools. So we're going to be watching that, and we're going to see what we can learn from it. Now, today, I have a very special guest that I'm bringing back to the channel to continue a conversation that we started a couple weeks ago. And I have a feeling that we could talk about this all day, every day. But guys, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Howard Asher. We all know Howard because we are doing a book club with Howard's latest book, 2024, in my locals community. Book club in locals is essentially where I try to bring an author on, or at least we read a book. I don't always get to bring the author on, but in this case, I'm very blessed that Howard has agreed to join my locals supporters for a private Zoom call, and we're going to be discussing his amazing book, 2024. It's a really great read. I strongly encourage it for everyone. If you haven't picked up your copy yet, it is in the description below, and you have enough time to pick up your copy of the book on Amazon. It has a paperback version. It also has a Kindle version. And you'll be able to read it to just in time to join us for book club on March 26th, where Howard's going to come into the community and we're going to have an amazing chat about the book. I'm really looking forward to it. Of course, when you join my locals, you also get a whole bunch of other things. We do community Zoom calls. We are actually going to be doing a community Zoom call in 2 hours. So you can join and actually come to a private community Zoom that is not recorded to meet the amazing members of my locals and talk to me. And we talk about whatever we want to talk about in our private space where we are not monitored by the interwebs. And it's just the most wonderful, supportive community that you could possibly imagine. We do those on Mondays at 7 p.m. We also do them on Wednesdays at noon to allow people in different time zones to take advantage. Other things we do in my locals are my Bitchcraft, which we did this past weekend, which is the second Saturday of every month, which we get together on a Zoom and we craft and we bitch. You can bring whatever crafts you want, whether it be knitting or crochet or painting or drawing or cleaning your gun or folding laundry or any of those other things. In addition to our book clubs, we have also just launched special interest groups in the supporter Discord for my community. So we've got so much stuff going on in my locals. And I have a special treat because I've decided that I would like to bring in 100 new supporters to my locals community in time for my birthday. My birthday is next month. It is April 12th. I will be older than I want to admit to on the internet. And if you want to give me the best birthday gift you could possibly give me, now is the perfect time to become a supporter in my locals community because I'm doing a special this week only. Now, normally it is $5 a month to become a supporter in my locals to get access to the book club and the Zoom calls and all that stuff. But if you sign up for an annual membership this week only, usually annual memberships, you get 2 months for free. I have increased it. Today, when you sign up for an annual membership at kb.locals.com/support, let me get up my little ticker. There we go. You will get not 1, not 2, but 3 free months in my locals. You can sign up for an annual membership for just $45 because I really want to bring everyone into it, guys. Like, honestly, my locals community keeps me sane. We keep each other sane. Our Zoom calls are the best. They're the best people in my locals. We're strategizing about how to fight back against the woke. We're doing all sorts of awesome things that we're trying to make the world a better place, or at least make ourselves feel better within this crazy world in which we live. And so if you want to join the fun, $45 for a year. That's pretty good. And what that goes to is, frankly, helping me to be able to make it possible to do the things that I'm doing, do the daily streams, do the focus on fighting back against the woke that I have. I literally cannot do this without the support of my locals community. So I want to bring in 100 new supporters. 100 new ones by my birthday. If you've been waiting, now is the time. But you're only going to get this $45 deal for the week, okay? I'm turning it back up to $50 at the end of the week. I know it's only $5. It probably doesn't make that much of a difference to most people, but I still think it's pretty good. So make sure you head over to kb.locals.com/support and become a member of the best community on locals today. All right. Without further ado, I want to bring on my very special guest for today. You know him. He has been on the channel a multitude of times. He is one of the favorite people that you guys like to hear from. And we're going to have a great conversation about everything that's wrong in the world, apparently. Howard, welcome back to the channel. So great to have you back again.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for what you said. You're right about being able to talk about this. We can go on and on and on. I was thinking about doing a 10-week course that met 3 days a week. And we, like what you were talking about right now, we can deal with every problem there is in the world. And so I encourage your what you were promoting by bringing more people to your channel, to your locals. That, you know, as a side to before we really launch in, one of the things people really have to fight against is feeling helpless.
Yes,
And
I agree.
And it's there's a term in psychology that's used. I don't know if everyone's familiar with it, but it's called learned helplessness. Not only is there helpless feelings, but we learn to be helpless. And this is exactly why I wrote these books. And I say these books. There was the previous book that I wrote, which was Loose Grip. And I suppose what can be asked when a writer does something, creates a piece of work, someone would ask, why did you do it? What motivated you to do it? It's really important, that motivation for it. And I want to tell you something about what motivated me. As a psychologist, and more so as a psychotherapist, and I'm making a distinction because in psychotherapy, you interact with people who are bringing distresses to a situation. And mostly when you encounter these people, they may be very eager to talk with you, but they're not confident that they're going to get the results that they want. This is really important for clinicians to know about who they're working with. Like what good does talking do for anything? And it's a fair question. And yet talking is integral to approaching a problem. So with the world being what it is and seeing the kind of political meltdowns that were going on and the kind of cartoon approach that the debaters, people who have voices, and what's said about those voices tends to be caricatures. All of this is written in both books. I'm going to refer to both books because the latest one, 2024, is an allegorical, kind of foundational, Orwellian kind of thing. And I even explain in the book why it's being presented that way. But the first book was called A Loose Grip. And in preparing for talking to you, whenever I write something, I'm very conscious that it can hold up if I look at it years later. I think that's very important. I'm sure you could relate to that.
Yes.
I'd hate to look at something I've written 10 years ago and think, what was I thinking? This is foolish. This isn't relevant.
That is my greatest fear with my new book, Howard. I have to tell you, I understand completely.
Absolutely. And you should have that fear. It just means you're conscientious that what you're writing, when you're writing, you're asking people, you're demanding them to take their time with your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So you better make good thoughts. They shouldn't be impulsive thoughts. So in that regard, um, you could look at the world problems, and you could be an economist and have an approach to what you should do with the world through an economist's viewpoint. You could be an educator, and you can have solutions as to what the world the world needs to be educated. You can be a politician and have a political approach, or a civil engineer, or any of the disciplines. You can approach what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, as a psychologist, I'd like to make a contribution, and beyond being a psychologist, be a psychotherapist, meaning if I treat the culture as if it were a patient that comes into the office and relates what struggles it's going through, what you need to do is to make the connection. Just remember, like, when I'm repeating myself, when someone comes to the to seek services like this, even if you have a good reputation, they're likely to be not confident that this discussion is going to make a difference.
Right.
And my goal with any person that I'm working with is that, contrary to having them come back over and over and over again in graduate school, they talked about having repeat clientele. Patients just keep coming back and you get them into therapy. And I always railed against that. I always said, if you're doing your work well, you're making what you do that the person be less dependent on what your services are. You're trying to help them to help themselves, as opposed to plugging them in and getting caught up in a system where they're never their own best person, and they got to rely on the therapist. Now, there are times it's appropriate to rely on a therapist, but this was sort of the approach that I was taking when I thought of all of the discord that you see in politics. And I coined a term. I called it political psychosis. There's something about politics that creates a certain kind of psychosis. Now, let me talk about another aspect and tie it in. I worked a lot with people who have their credentials, their academic credentials, who want to get licensed, and they have to do so many supervising hours.
Right.
So I work with them as a supervisor before they get licensed. I work in state of California. So I always had a question that I started with that was intended to jab at them. It was a setup question. And I asked them, as a therapist, what's your job? And the intention was for them to give me bad answers. And the answers tended to be something like, it's to cure, it's to help, it's to fix, it's to, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's normal enough because, in a broad-based way, you're there to help. So why wouldn't that be the right answer? But it's not. I wanted to provide this question to them so that they can get on the right track as quickly as they possibly can. And of course, it was a setup question, and they would say their answers, and I would say, nope, nope, that's not your job. Your job isn't to fix, it's not to help, it's not to cure. I said, your job is to understand. End of subject.
Mm-hmm.
You are there to simply understand. They're paying for your time so that you can understand. And the way that you understand is you pay attention to what they're presenting, and then you ask questions if you don't understand something until you do understand something. And the rationale for that is, remember I said, they're already coming to you not confident that they're going to get what they are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens to somebody when they have a moment of connection, when they see that the other person gets it?
It's funny because I talk about this a lot in reference to like change management and that sort of thing, and it's true in the workplace, but I also think it's true in just the world in general. is the number one thing that that you need to do in order to manage change effectively, to get people to, go from doing things one way to doing things another way, is you need to listen to them. And
Right.
that's it. You need to listen to them, and you need to create an environment where they genuinely feel as though they have been heard, considered, and understood in the context of whatever decision is being made, whatever is being changed in their world, whatever that happens to be. And this is in the workplace, because I'm an organizational psychologist for those who I'm not a clinician like Howard, but in the workplace, this is one of the most often skipped over steps, and managers feel like they just need to have the all staff meeting and explain to people, here's what we're going to do and here's why we're going to do it. And that doesn't work because they haven't taken the time to genuinely listen to people. And even if someone doesn't agree with a decision that's made, you can get them to buy into that decision purely by having that moment of connection that you just talked to, where they're like, okay, I don't agree with it, but you heard me out and you understood my perspective and you cared enough to have that conversation with me. Am I on the right track that this is kind of like the same thing of what you're talking about when you're telling people that your job is to understand?
Yeah, it's precisely what I'm getting at. If you start going off into all the other kinds of directions,
Mhm.
you've lost the patient.
Yep.
Even if they like what you're saying, because what you're saying won't mean anything unless they know that you get it.
Mhm. It also
And
strikes me too, oh, sorry, but, like, it strikes me too, so I used to do this a lot when I was coaching people, because I would go in and coach, like, multiple people in an organization, and it would sometimes get a little awkward, but whatever. But, like, I viewed my role as a coach as someone that was like, it wasn't my job to change them, it wasn't my job to fix them, it was my job to create a space where they could come to a better understanding of themselves and what they wanted to achieve. And if they can do that in a space with me, that means that they can take that and actually make changes in their real life.
it's really key. And because of human nature, or wanting to help somebody, you have to challenge that impulse, because in your zeal to go help somebody and give them the answers, you'll miss the opportunity of doing your job, which is
Mhm.
simply to understand. And that's what people respond to. They respond to more that you get it than even if you have advice or recommendations beyond that.
Mhm.
So it's, you can see how much I'm emphasizing. I'm really taking my time on the part. I'm agreeing with you. You're understanding exactly what I'm saying. You see it in your own work, and
Yep.
there is nothing that's going to come of any kind of um, resolutions that were desired unless there's this first connection, that you understand what your job is. Your job isn't to change minds; it's to understand what's going on.
Mhm.
So,
Howard, can I before we
yeah.
go off on that, I just got a super chat and it's a question for you. So I want to just take it now while we're kind of thinking about it. AD wants to know, Dr. Asher, are you familiar with attacks on evidence-based medicine, especially on medical epistemology in relation to traditional medicine?
No, I'd like that to be. I mean, I know the term. I would like to know exactly what more they're asking on this.
Yeah. AD, if you want to chat in a clarification, we can try to get you a better answer on that one. Um,
No, I'm curious about what they brought up, but I need to understand more what the question means.
yeah, no, I totally understand. Sometimes it's hard when you have a short super chat and you can only explain so much in the super chat, but we'll wait for AD to chat in some clarification there. Um, but Howard, where do you want to
No,
go? Like,
no, yeah,
so
okay, so yeah,
I
I'm going.
interrupted you. I apologize.
No, no, no. I'm looking forward to that. So anyway, in doing some research, I was talking to you about writing something and then going back to it, and
Mm-hmm.
then seeing how it holds up. So one of the things is I'm looking at my book, A Loose Grip, and it's broken down into four parts. And the four parts are: the first is, let me just get
Mm-hmm.
it correctly. I forgot.
It's easy to do. I understand.
I know. Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. A republic and the nature of people. A republic and the nature of people. And I thought, wow, I'm really glad I put that, because what do we care what the republic is? The republic is, it's a political theory.
The Republic
Uh,
is a group of people.
yeah, yeah. But what I cared about was, well, what are people's natures? What are they looking for in a republic? And so I was glad that I had that. The second part was the Trump thing, which is one of the subtitles, which is subtitled in the book, Trump, because it was a phenomenon that took place, and I wanted to explain what was going on, the Trump thing. And then the part 3 was who's crazy. Now it's interesting. I actually have a whole section that I'm going to now dive into crazy. So I'm talking about the Republic. I'm talking about the nature of people. The Trump thing happened. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. Wherever you stand on Trump, you know that there was some kind of tsunami that came through our culture and politics, and I make a big deal. It said more about our culture than it did about Trump. Everyone focuses too much on Trump, but so I refer to it as the Trump thing just to identify it. And then I remember when I was writing the book, I came to part 4 in this last part, and it's called You. You. So obviously what I'm trying to convey here is that there's a reason for all of these aspects of our human existence, of our politics, of our interpersonal activity with one another, our value set, a whole bunch of stuff is going on. And if we only apprehend it like it's a cartoon, we're not going to get it. And so I'm motivated by wanting people to get this by showing people what I got, in other words, what I understand, and I'm conveying it to people. So I
really like the section of who's crazy.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you. You'll
I like that a lot.
Okay, so who's crazy? It asks the question, who's crazy? And I'll tell you something. I have an answer for you too. So yeah. So no, you don't have to be scared of the answer. You should be happy for the answer that's going to come.
I fear the answer is everyone.
Well, okay. You're onto something, but I make a distinction. So if you could just hold off until I get to that point. So anyway, a long time ago, as I was thinking about my career and about what I was doing, I get into sort of poetic ideas, and I said to myself, the first psychologist that I'm really paying attention to was Shakespeare. I always considered Shakespeare the first psychologist. And the reason is, I think you probably are understanding, is because he wrote so much about human nature.
Yes.
His dialogues were the first that I'm aware of in a big way on the world stage. And by the way, Shakespeare was kind of forgotten for about 100-year period. There was a time when the world didn't know about Shakespeare. He was popular during the Elizabethan time. He became repopularized. That's an interesting subject in itself. But I thought that Shakespeare,
and now they're trying to cancel him.
In 2024, there's a section on and the complete works of Shakespeare are canceled in this dystopian culture. Okay, so you'd be happy to know that. Not that it was canceled, but that I recognized it.
I know. I read the book. I think it's great.
Thank you for mentioning. No, there's lots of nuggets in there too. So that's something that I think the readers will really enjoy and pick up on. But anyway, I identified Shakespeare as this kind of big figure that was the real first psychologist in the world. And so I had that in the background. And then I was thinking about the formation of of this nation, the revolution, the founding documents, all the iconic things that Americans have been pretty well taught. I'm worried that they're not getting taught in these generations, but I think you're old enough. There was a lot of education about the Revolutionary War.
Yes.
Slavery, Constitution, the Bill of Rights. So it was a big deal. It was a big deal that this republic was established, was something that hadn't happened ever before. And in the founding documents, it it sets out to say why it's there. And it's there to preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is a psychological statement.
Mm-hmm.
The word happy in a founding document, I mean, think about it. McDonald's has a Happy Meal, for kids, okay? And happy or happiness is a word that's in the essence of the founding principles. I mean, I think that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I
just,
agree.
it's a common word. People can relate to it. Are you happy? Are you not happy? And happy even sounds like a silly word. It's an important word, but it's got two P's and a Y at the end, so it's kind of a silly word.
Mm-hmm.
And there it is in a founding document, happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And the order of this was profound too. Life, that's the first thing. You deserve to have a life. And liberty, like life without liberty is not a life.
Right.
And then the cherry on top was that happiness. So what I'm trying to convey here is that was a psychological statement. Sure, there was geopolitical aspects to it. There were economic aspects to it. There were political aspects to it. There were lots of things about that. But you could make a case, if it was anything, it was a psychology statement, a psychological statement.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. And what is this is making me think about it. I want to go back to the super chats in a second. We got another question for you. People are already raring to ask you questions. But one of the things that strikes me today, Howard, about our crazy times is that people are really trying to rob other people of their happiness. And
Absolutely.
this is something I've been thinking a lot about in regards to what I'm doing in my locals community, and we're starting to form an unwoke army to do different strategies to fight back against the woke. And one of the things I've said from the very beginning is like, I want this to be fun. I want us to have joy. I want to make fighting back against this crazy cultural revolution like a fun, happy, joyful, playful experience, because I think that makes people more inclined to do it. But one of the things that's been so striking to me, and why I definitely wanted to have this follow-up conversation with you, and also our original conversation as well, it's that people on both sides of the issue seem to have gotten so tribal in their mindsets that they are trying to rob joy and happiness from every other person around them. Where like if I say something like I treat like Twitter especially as like performance art. I have fun with it. I play with it. I try to play like like Andy Kaufman. Well, I was like a huge Andy Kaufman fan, but Andy Kaufman was a troll. Like, let's be real. But like, there was great joy and humor in trolling people and
Yeah.
provoking that emotional reaction. And I feel like on both sides, anytime. And maybe this is a me thing, but I feel like on both sides, anytime I do anything, I have people coming at me saying, "How dare you have fun with this? How dare you be happy with this?" I'm like, "You're not stealing my joy for anything. I'm having a great time. If you don't like it, you don't have to follow." Am I wrong about what's
I
going
no,
on though
I,
when I
I
say that they're trying to rob us of our joy?
no, I love that. First of all, I agree with you 1,000,000%. Absolutely. You should be a happy warrior in what you're doing, but you are a warrior. You're fighting for an idea. And what I'm trying to do is reinforce what I think the idea is all about, which is why I made a big deal about the founding document, what's in the document, and to identify this was a psychological statement.
Mm-hmm.
and
It
and and
is.
yeah, and so you're gonna like when I get to the part about crazy, because well that's a defamatory kind of word. I say, well, I also use the word nuts and crazy. I use it all the time. And there were people who would be offended by that when these are really appropriate words for what we're going to get into talking about. um, uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually thinking about your listeners. Do you have questions of what I've
Yeah.
said so far?
Let's go down. Well, not necessarily about what you've said so far, but people have questions about other things. So I want to go back to AD's question, and we were going to start with the super chat. He's chatted in some clarifications, and so he asked you about what you knew about attacks on evidence-based medicine, especially in the medical epistemology related to traditional medicine. And then we asked him for clarification, and he said, in psychology, evidence-based psychological methods of treating, say, Native Americans is attacked as epistemologically Eurocentric, And then he says standard treatments of psychological disorders are based on flawed Eurocentric epistemology that can't be used to treat other cultures. Have you run into that, Howard?
Yeah. Okay, now I know better what he was referring to. And boy, is this great. That's really great, because that concern addresses that there's differences between people because they come from different origins.
Mm-hmm.
They are different races. They are different sexes or genders. I mean, all those differences. So the question's setting up like, well, who are these people to make any statements about these people? Do they have any credibility? Do they have any standing to interject their value sets? And this is, I don't want to go too far off, because but I want to emphasize what an important subject this is, because it's one of the areas that's hijacking all of our common sense. All of our common sense. In graduate school, went through a course of study called cultural differences. In other words, even when I was in graduate school, they identified that whatever we were learning, there could be limitations to how we might understand or apply clinically if you encounter somebody from a different culture.
Oh yeah, I had to take that course too. I have a whole book about it on my bookshelf, like how different cultures interpret different things.
Sure. So it's not a new idea. But here's something. Here's something that you can use the differences to actually enhance the connection.
Oh yeah.
It's not a problem that it doesn't. In other words, you're not disqualified to approach somebody or to work with somebody because they're in another culture than you are. I felt very like when I was working with Vietnam War veterans who had horrible, post-traumatic symptoms, and felt like, who the hell am I to be talking with this person who's gone through experiences that were, unimaginable, and I'm going to help them and say, well, let's do some deep breathing exercises, or try to counterbalance those thoughts with these thoughts. In other words, I could. This is why I said the first part. You need to understand these people. You don't preach to these people.
Right.
And understanding can happen by reaching to understand these people, and people appreciate the reach, and that's how you deal with it.
Howard, would you argue that there is just a lack of inclination by people on any side, really, to understand people that I won't even say people that they disagree with, understand other people in general? Because what it seems like to me is happening is people are just always, I want to say on the offense, but it almost feels like they're always defensive, to be honest. Like they're always like it's almost in like always fight or flight mode, where they always feel like they need to defend their position or defend their tribe no matter what's being said, to the point where I would argue that there are times when I'm legitimately trying to have like a good faith conversation with someone, and they aren't even able to process what I'm saying because they're already in their heads like thinking, how am I going to defend against this and defend my tribe?
That's the problem. The problem isn't that people come from different backgrounds, different orientations, or different experiences. The problem is that there's a refusal that no matter where anyone comes from, there's always a reach that you can make to another person. And I remember talking to somebody, another lifetime, but I was working with a woman, and she came from South Korea, and she was talking about some family matters and things like that. And I asked her, I said, I know little of what I think I've understood about Korean culture, but I didn't experience it. So can you educate me about what the expectations you grew up with in your country? So she was informing me, she was educating me, and she knew that I was trying to understand instead of coming from some kind of perch over here of some expertise and then laying it on her. And so, I admitted that I didn't have an understanding or an experience with what they had gone through. But it didn't take anything that was difficult to be informed and educated to the point where she said, "No, you understand me completely. Thank you for asking that question." And it helped the interaction, and it helped whatever the goal was to alleviate distresses. So just to shift back to this idea that the founding of this country was a psychological statement, and then it's shored up by the next part of the founding documents, which come out in the First Amendment. The First Amendment, which is, if you only had one amendment, that would be the only one you needed.
Yeah.
Because the other ones, sure, whatever was about them. But the First Amendment was freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom, and it doesn't say thought, but if it's freedom of speech, it means freedom of thought.
Right.
And right there, you have the full breadth of a psychological approach to living, liberty, happiness, and how do you therapize it ongoing? How do you mediate all of the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? You do it through freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my first book started. It said, we have a disorder, and we're stopping thought and we're stopping speech. And if you stop thought and you stop speech, and everyone knows what I'm talking about when I say stop thought, that means you need to allow available things you don't agree with. You need to allow available things that are offensive.
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, I would argue that's the most important speech to protect is speech that you find offensive.
Absolutely.
Because if you can protect the most offensive possible speech, then you're protecting speech for yourself.
Sure. So what did the big tech companies do, whether it's Twitter or Facebook?
They made illegal offensive speech.
They did that. They did that. Now, there's this big argument, and I wrote about it in the first book. I said, well, the question comes, are they a publisher or are they a utility, a public utility?
Yeah.
And I think a strong argument can be made for they simultaneously do both. They publish and they are a utility. But as much as they are a utility, that means that they are counter healthy psychology. They're going against good health in psychology and well-being by stopping speech.
Mm-hmm.
If you allow free speech, it means you're allowing every vulgarity and every lie that there is out there. But here's the thing about this. If you don't allow free speech, then you allow all those vulgarities to live stronger. So the healthy psychological therapeutic approach to all of this is in the freedom of speech aspect of this.
Mm-hmm. And it's also to help people, quite frankly, like inoculate themselves from speech that they don't like. And I feel like that's become such a lost art. And guys, I know you've been super chatting in some other questions, and I promise we'll get back to those. But like, I really feel like we are creating a society in which we are encouraging people to say, your words are violence against me.
Yeah.
And not just on the woke left. I have experienced this in dozens of different instances from people who claim to be anti-woke, who will complain about what's going on in the schools and complain about critical race theory and anti-racism and the media and all that stuff. And then you say something that they don't like and they're like, you're a narcissist, or they're like, or you're like, how dare you say that? And then they try to get you canceled over it. And I'm like, hang on a second. I thought we were all on the same page that like words aren't violence. And all of a sudden it's like they don't know how to handle when people disagree with them, or when people use a tone they don't like, or any of these things. And I'm just like, this is still all protected speech. Just because you don't like someone doesn't mean that you should be able to cancel their very existence.
Yeah, and I think it's the greatest threat we face right now.
Mm-hmm.
We won't be able to hold on to any semblance of a positive republic, so people can have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, if you get rid of free speech.
Exactly.
And that terrifies me more than anything. So I've been trying to make a case. Let's don't do that. Let's don't cut our throats.
And it terrifies me too. And again, like the thing that really terrifies me the most is seeing it on both sides of the aisle, of seeing people that, 2 years ago were completely on board with, yes, we need to protect the First Amendment and individual liberty and all that. And then going from that to, I mean, the right tries to cancel people too. The
Yeah.
right does this stuff all the time. And it doesn't give me any great pleasure to say that, but I'm just like, man, is there any group of people that actually like what has gone so wrong that people do not understand the importance of protecting freedom of speech and freedom of thought and freedom of religion and freedom of assembly and all of those things that, a couple years ago, I feel like we had a much better understanding of how important some of these things are. And I find it actually to be really ironic that in an era where, did you know that yesterday was like 2 years, the 2-year anniversary of 15 days to slow the spread?
Oh,
And so we had this time when people were literally not allowed to go to church. Now, I don't go to church, but I want to protect everyone else's right to go to church if they want to.
right.
How did we, especially in this time when so many people were having their First Amendment liberties infringed upon, seem to forget how important it is to protect these things?
I'll tell you. I'll tell you what happened was the pandemic and our response to it. It's the camel's nose under the tent. When the threat of of COVID happened, and people started to unpack that the way people unpack that. Some people immediately said, "Okay, this is a big problem." Other people said, "Oh, it's no big deal." Anyway, people just did everything with it. But
Mhm.
eventually, it turned into shutting down our business. We shut down schools. We shut down. And what happened is that presented as a legitimate emergency to the point where, okay, we'll shut it down. If we don't go to church for a week or two, no big deal. If we don't
Mhm.
go to school for a week or two, no big deal. Well, the camel's got its nose under the net, under the tent, and then its neck came and said, "Well, let's do it for a little longer." And then the two, whatever political forces there were, started to glom on to the virtues of taking a position, and with that came shutting things down. And it started with, well, because we had a compelling reason. And so the that old line about "don't let a crisis go to waste." We've allowed a crisis will always be happening. There'll be natural disasters. We got the war going on. It's a war.
Mhm.
It's sidetrack. I mean, people worry about World War III. It's happening.
Yeah.
It's right there. And so there are compelling reasons to do things. Well, will we do anything that will set up a slippery slope to where from now on we don't talk? Maybe um, even Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. So there's these crises that happen that may require an extreme response, and then once we do the extreme response, we never roll it back.
Mhm.
We stay on a roll. So I was going to now go to the part where I discuss who's crazy, but I don't know if you want to catch up with your
Yeah,
question.
let's catch up with some super chats, and then you can reveal to us who's actually the real crazy one. So we've got some from Chris Baker, who's a great liberty activist. How can we use techniques like covert hypnosis? I'm not sure that's ethical, Chris. To hang on, sorry, still getting over a cold. How can we use techniques like covert hypnosis to manipulate the pathetics in the direction of liberty? How can we gaslight people in that direction? That's a little sneaky, but Howard, I'm going to turn that over to you and see what you have to say about it. And Chris, wait, Chris actually goes on. Most Homo sapiens want to be gaslighted, manipulated, and lied to. We learned that on September 11th, 2001. Libertarians need to be better manipulators.
Okay, I'll try to power through that. There's a lot of layers going on in that question.
Yeah.
Basically, we're doing it now. I'm a big fan of just having dialogue. Civil long. I like long interviews. I don't like short interviews. Tendency in
Me
cable
too.
news. Yeah, and so you got to flesh these ideas out, and they need to marinate, and they need to be presented, and you need to extract the caricature parts out of the discussion. There's a line that's spoken in the book. There's a difference between knowing somebody and knowing about somebody. That there's people got to take the time to develop an understanding about stuff. And so the things that were raised in that question is you don't have to gaslight people to get them to understand. And if you do gaslight them, they won't. That by definition they're not understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is you peel back the the onion a layer at a time, and so the whole thing can make sense, and it becomes obvious. The kinds of directions make the most sense. So you don't have to gaslight people to get them to understand. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to do.
We don't have to be sneaky about it. AD says it's like this epistemological wall is being built by these people. LOL. Ironically, they must want to build the wall, like referring to people who want you to use different techniques for someone based on their culture and saying that Eurocentric techniques can't work. I agree with you there, AD. And then Chris sent one more super chat in. He says college professors will always be the biggest enemies of liberty. How can you have a free speech society? This is actually an interesting question. Can you have a free speech society in colleges, and will college professors ever be honest? I mean, I think my answer to that is I think that they are being honest.
The college professors?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I guess I don't care if they think they're being honest. They're going to teach what they're going to teach. Here's the problem with college: is you're going there to get a grade.
Yeah.
And so if you start doing throwdowns with even intelligent throwdowns with the professors, they're and ethically, if you're making a good case, you shouldn't that shouldn't go against you or penalize getting a good grade. But the realities of a thing like that, if you make yourself a pain in the ass in the class and you challenge things, and if they're even good challenges, you risk getting a crappy grade. And a lot of people could say, well, that's the risk you should take. And I go, well, that's kind of narrow. If you're trying to get a credential, just remember, a credential is a credential, and a credential in some ways is a bureaucratic mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Before. This is very cynical, but before I completed my doctorate dissertation, I used to say, before you've completed it, you have to espouse other people's BS. After you've completed the doctorate, then you can espouse your own BS.
Exactly in person. I mean, I used to think that too. It's like it amazes me that and partially I think this is because I just spent 10 years working in higher education, but it amazes me that people care so much about where you went to school, when in fact it's like it's one of the most least interesting things in the world, to be honest, because even if you go to like Harvard, like, so my cousin was one of the top ranked female ice hockey players like in the country, and this was back when women's ice hockey was just getting added to the Olympics, and they were like all these colleges were creating all these sports teams. I bring that up because she got recruited by like every Ivy League school there was. She ended up going to Cornell, but she said at one point, she was like, I always regretted not going to Harvard because no one fails at Harvard.
Oh,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
no,
they
exactly.
will not let you fail.
Well, I'll tell you something. I don't know if it comes as a surprise, but I've been doing this now close to 50 years. I've never had a patient ask me where I went to school.
Oh yeah.
I've never
I never had a client ask me where I got my PhD. The only
had,
people that seem to care are people that are trying to rip me apart on the internet.
well, I'll tell you where else it cares. I do depositions, and
Mm-hmm.
so that comes down all the time. So, I'm 100% of the time when I've sat on done a deposition, and was taking a position against a certain lawyer. The opposing lawyers always wanted to know, what my grades were, and where I went to school. That always comes
Mm-hmm.
up, and it's because in the legal situation with court cases, the truth's not important.
Right.
They're there to make a. They just want to win.
That's but I think that's applicable to, like, the real world too, and I think that, like, how you just put that is, I mean, again, exactly like what I experience when I'm in these, like, well, basically any discussion in the world now. It's like the truth is unimportant. How many holes you can poke in someone else's side, no matter what tactic you're using to poke the holes, whether it has to do with the actual topic being discussed or it's something completely superfluous. It's like that's where the priority is, because the priority is not truth. The priority is you are my enemy, and I'm going to do everything I can to twist every bit of information that I can to make you look bad. Because I don't care about the truth. I only care about making you look bad because you are not in my tribe.
Yeah, I'm actually grateful for the experiences I've had to see that, up close and personal. Um, but and juxtaposed to the idea that when you're there as a psychotherapist, they want to know whether you're connecting with them. That's all.
Yeah.
They almost they don't even care you went to school.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making connection with them and you're sensible and you're helping with with their problem, their issues, whatever, that's what they're paying attention to. That's what matters. Now, and again, I'm not putting down education and credentials.
Right.
I'm all for that. But again, this is all about understanding where all these things fit in how we interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hang on. Before we get into who's crazy, I just want to do a quick promo. Guys, we are about an hour into this discussion with Howard. If you are enjoying it, I hope you will consider mounting that like button for me, letting the YouTube algorithm know you're enjoying it. So hopefully we can get more people coming in and listening to the awesome things that Howard has to say. If you are not subscribed to my channel, I hope you will consider subscribing today. I do daily content, live streams at 5 o'clock almost every day of the week. I do clips as well. So there will always be something new on the channel. So I hope I'll earn your subscription today. And of course, make sure you pick up Howard's latest book, 2024. We are reading it for book club in my locals community. Book club is going to be on March 26th. Howard's going to come and join us for a private chat. So plenty of time to get your copy of Howard's book. The link is in the description below. It's available on Amazon, and I'm sure some other places as well, but I've linked to the Amazon link in the description below. So make sure you get your copy and come and join us in the community on March 26th for book club with Howard. All right, Howard, who's crazy? Let us know who's crazy. Let's get into it.
I'm going to tell you who's crazy. So, minding my own business, not really. I'm writing this book. This is the first book, A Loose Grip, and very naturally it comes to the third part, and I title it "Who's Crazy?" And I say that this is an unavoidable question. It has to be asked and it has to be answered, because we're living in a world where crazy is what seems to be running everything, or we're at risk of crazy running too many things. And then I address. I remember when you get your credentials, you become a professional in psychology and psychotherapy, and in a way, there was an expectation for me not to use the word crazy or nuts. Words that I very much like.
I get in trouble for using words like psychological fuckery. Might be a little bit vulgar for some, but crazy or nuts, we could substitute.
Well, there's no question that such a thing exists. Yes. So I have no problem with the word at all. But you can see that these words are edgy, and they wouldn't be considered polite or professional, but they do have more impact than if I would talk about some kind of personality disorder or something like that, which has a certain kind of interest, but it doesn't give you the gravitas that a word like crazy or nuts. Now, let me share with you something. This is about the connection that you can make with somebody. And this kind of came up, this came up before on our previous live stream. And I saw some comments and they thought maybe what I said didn't quite make sense. But I talked about talking to a people, it often happens, talking with someone paranoid schizophrenic. And I told you that there's a time that you could just ask them to put their disorder aside, take a
Mm-hmm.
deep breath, and talk to me like you're fully engaged and coherent. And they can do that,
Mm-hmm.
and I share that because I thought that might be a surprise to people. People think that, schizophrenia is such a serious condition that there'd be no way to access, normality within their condition.
Yeah.
And I was trying to tell you they can. They can. All is not lost. You can talk to a paranoid schizophrenic. You've got a window of opportunity. So, in the same way, it may not seem like it's the same way, but someone comes into my office and they relate something that's going on. And I might ask them something like, talking to them like a normal person and say to them, "Are you nuts?
Hmm.
What's wrong with you?" Now, a therapist or a professional is not supposed to sound that way, right?
Right.
Because there's nothing wrong with anybody. Now we're kind of getting into a little bit of wokeness.
Yeah.
We don't want to say, and by the way, wokeness is messing with the field of psychology.
Incredibly badly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can see why I'm a fan of using words like "what's wrong with you," and you should understand that if I come to a point where I'm asking a person that, I've got a good connection with them. And you know what happens when I would ask if my senses are spot on? They'll tell me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they'll say, "Yeah, I got overwhelmed and I got afraid and I just did this and I shouldn't have done that." In other words, you're having the conversation you should have with this person.
Yeah, I think anytime if you have a connection with that person, you can absolutely ask them, and if they feel comfortable enough, they'll tell you. But if you don't have that connection, they're not going to tell you.
That's
But
right.
like, but people usually do know. It's just like whether or not they want to say it.
Well, right. That's why first things, job one is to do the connection. Once you got the connection, you don't have to get, high and mighty with them. You just say, well, that sounds crazy. Where'd you come up with that?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it's really appreciated by them. That's the other thing. They could see that you could see, and that so I'm on to another. I remember, I think I said this on a live stream before. I had a very positive session with this woman, and she got a lot out of it. And she complimented me at the end. She says, "I really like talking to you. You're not judgmental."
Mm-hmm.
And I put up the time. I said, "Time out, time out. Excuse me. I couldn't have been very helpful to you if I wasn't judgmental. What you really meant to say is I'm not an a-hole."
Yeah.
And this is what psychotherapy is. It's a continued juxtaposition of trying to get things more and more real, more and more relatable, more and
Mm.
more. It's a whole thing. And I could just say, "Oh, thank you for that. I'm not judgmental." But no, I am. I'm just not an a-hole about it. I assess and I size things up all the time. That's my stock and trade in doing that. And then I share it, at the time that it needs to be shared. So what does this have to do with who's crazy? So it's unavoidable because if you look at the people running, public offices and the speeches they make and the debates they do, and just whatever they do, you come away going, these people are nuts.
Yeah.
And so Trump finds himself in office, and a book comes out by now I'm forgetting the person's name. Doesn't matter. It's in the book, but it was a compilation of a lot of psychologists who called Trump.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking. That woman from Yale. I know. I can
Yeah,
see her face. I know who you're talking
yeah.
about.
She lost her job, by the way, and if
And
it's
she should have.
yeah, she should have. So there was an ethical violation for what she wrote, and she was off the mark clinically. It was bad analysis of the situation. But Trump was crazy. There should be the 25th Amendment, and you got to get him out of there because he's nuts. And so I bring up the book. It's like, well, if we're going to do that, who's going to be in office? Who the hell's going to be in office? Because I get a rundown. What do you have to say about this person? What do you have to say about that person? And by the way, go ahead and say he's nuts, or go ahead and say these other people are nuts. So I'm making a case that our use and our understanding of a very important term is gone haywire.
Mm-hmm.
It's useful, but it has to be used skillfully. And there are people who have disorders, anxieties, depressions, delusions, and all of these things in the public arena that have to do with what I'm referring to as political psychosis is absolutely real. There's no question about it. And we're not going to be doing psych evals on everybody who's in office. It's not practical. I don't know what we can do, whatever we conclude anyway.
Well, and people also, by the way, have a right to elect people that are insane. If that's who you want to represent you.
You know what? I don't have any problem with somebody who might be insane if the policies work out really well. And that can happen. That actually can happen. Of course, disasters can happen. And there are lines where you got to wonder, what measures can be taken based on a person's mental capacities. So it is a real issue. I'm not shying away from it. But I posed the question at the beginning of the part 3. Who's crazy? And I saved the answer for the end because you're supposed to write dramatically, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to read it to you. Sorry, I didn't have it queued up here.
That's okay. You're just building the suspense, Howard. Well, while you're finding your part, I'm going to thank the Brooklyn Way for her super chat. These lives have been so enriching. Thank you both, and definitely follow Carlin on Stasi Bluebird, aka the Twitters. Value add on the scroll game. I appreciate that, the Brooklyn Way. Thank you for your support, and thank you for attending today, guys. Mount that like button if you haven't already. Make sure you pick up a copy of Howard's book, which he's going to read the ending to us, the grand conclusion in a second.
Well, the ending of that part, let me see. And for some reason, oh, this is terrible. I should have had it queued up.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's all right.
Right. Well, actually, I remember it. So I don't know. I think I just want to get all the words right.
Yeah. Who's crazy?
Anybody who can't be reasonable when it's necessary. That's what crazy is.
I like that. Anyone that can't be reasonable when it's necessary. How would you define necessary?
Well, it's almost self-evident. There's public policies that have to be, made. There are decisions that have to be made geopolitically. Let's focus for that question on what's going on in Ukraine, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, I don't have any problem that there are people who want to address climate change. There are climate issues. It's awfully complicated, and of course it's tearing the country apart politically. But John Kerry is got some kind of position where he's like some kind of climate czar.
The climate czar, yes.
Yeah, that is. And so the war breaks out, and Ukraine is being slaughtered, and it's being leveled. And Kerry insensitively says, "I hope this won't, slow down the progress in climate change."
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, look, I didn't ask you to stop caring about climate. Okay, do it to your heart's content. But I can assure you that people in Ukraine who are having tanks come into the cities and bombs, the last thing they need to consider is climate issues.
Right.
And that's a very dramatic, but it's happening, real thing that being sensible is not giving weight to the climate issue over the genocide that those people face. And it's insulting them. It's insulting wherever that's happened in the world throughout history. And again, I'm repeating that there isn't, on at least my part, to prevent people from trying to deal with what their concerns about climate change, but it's not reasonable or sensible to be raising it in that context.
Mm-hmm.
Politics does that a lot.
Yeah.
There's an issue that presents over here, and then they bring a non sequitur to address it. And
Well,
that's
not only do they bring a non sequitur to address it, but then they go, "You're a Nazi if you don't agree with us." It's
exactly.
like, okay, what do you want me to do with that?
What do you want me to do with it? That's exact. You see, where you could look to leadership to step in to do what you think leadership might do, but leaders do that. So that's nuts. That's crazy. And what do? You wait till the next election to see if you can get somebody else in. That usually doesn't work out anyway. People tend to get reelected.
Mm-hmm.
That's another interesting phenomenon. I'm just using the word interesting because I can't come up with a better word. But I do believe if people paid attention to what's sensible and reasonable, weighed things out as to what matters in any given situation, we would find, I think a healthy election should probably be something like at least 60 to 40% one way, 70, but they're not, they're 50-50. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Because the idea that like there's sort of like a certain broad-based intelligence in a democracy, and in a democracy the choices should be closer to something like 60 to 40.
Well, it tells you people are not making decisions rationally or by looking at evidence or statements or any of these things. They're making decisions based on what their tribe is telling them to do.
Yeah, well, that's taken over for people, and then they get a caricature understanding of the world, and then they start blaming personalities. I mean, you can get a lot of traction out of blaming some people because they do things and say things that are pretty absurd. But then you get like what happened with Trump, as we still is. You get obsessed with it, and you lose sight of where the policy decisions are what are important, and the personalities aren't. And
Right.
we're very, very heavily weighted to. We have, I think, personality politics more than anything right now.
Well, and we're all experiencing the result of personality politics, aren't we? I mean, how much is gas out in California, Howard?
Well, I got close to $6
Oh,
last time I put it
God.
in.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's the most in California, right? Than anywhere else.
I think so. I think it's like $4 here or something,
Oh,
4.50, something like that. But it's absurd. It's like crazy. And this is all because Trump's mean tweets were more important to people. And I even saw a clip. Someone posted a clip from, I think it was like the second debate between Trump and Biden, the one that Trump was a little bit better at, where
yeah,
Joe Biden basically said he was going to get rid of all of the fossil fuel stuff. He
yes,
laid it out. He said we're going to get rid of all of this because we're going to go to renewable energy. And Trump was like, "Do you guys hear what he's saying? Do you guys
yeah,
hear what he's going to do to the oil industry?" And then he got elected and he got rid of the Keystone XL pipeline on day one. And now look at the position that we're in because Russia decided to invade Ukraine. And now the only thing that we can really do to hurt them is by not importing their gas, which is, I'm not sure how much that's actually going to hurt them anyway, because China seems to be in their back pocket. But like what we're experiencing right now, from gas prices to the supply chain issues to inflation to ongoing COVID nonsense, even though they're trying to pretend that the pandemic is going away and that we should all just forget about it. Like everything is because of the personality politics.
absolutely. And worse than that, or to emphasize what you're saying, there is, no matter who's in charge, who's no matter which party is in office, there is something that will take over, like reality and practicalities, to where the Democrats don't want to preside over this kind of increase in energy, except for the very extreme who actually want this to happen, so that it forces the issue of, you see, we need renewable resources. But in the moment, no party wants to be presiding over this stuff. And I believe that they would have opened up those pipelines. They would have drilled more. But if they did, then the next question would come to the to the Biden administration would be asked, was it a mistake not to open this up before? And of course, they don't want to say that, because then the next question is, well, does that make Donald Trump right? And because they can't say that Donald Trump was right about the energy situation, instead of doing what is practical, I mean, think about all the people losing their jobs because they can't run their businesses because they have delivery trucks they can't fuel up.
Oh yeah, and even more than that, I've seen people, because I still kind of sometimes look at my LinkedIn. I don't really use LinkedIn that much, but I'm still connected to like all these HR people from like my former life. And I've been seeing some of them posts lately. They're like, are any of you guys talking to employees that are having trouble filling up their tank in order to get to work because it's gotten so expensive? So
Yeah,
this is actually getting in the way now. I mean, people have like just started getting back to an actual office environment, and now they can't even pay for gas to get them to the office.
it's very serious. And I think that they're, with everything that's going on in Ukraine and all of that, I think that they're going to open up pipelines. It's not a question of when or if. I think it's a question of when. And they're going to have to answer that question. Why didn't you do this before?
Mhm.
And so this is an insane way to be making decisions. And that's what's nuts. This is unreasonable and it's not sensible. And it's a very broad issue. The argument can be made. It's in some with lots of detail about how it's necessary to keep fossil fuels flowing, so that if you want to get advancements in new energy resources, you do it through fossil fuels. They may not be the end all, down the road, but they're very critical right now. And messing with that actually has the opposite effect of not getting to other resources that might be developed, but you do it through fossil resources.
Mhm.
And again, yeah, I'm not an energy expert, but I have done a bit of deep dive into this kind of thing, and I think we're cutting our nose off to spite our face.
Yeah.
If you want renewables, you do it through fossil fuels.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, Howard, I want to get into this. Like, so the people that are crazy are the ones who are incapable of being reasonable when it's necessary to have a reasonable conversation. Do I have that right?
Right.
Okay. So how do we so one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in terms of, what we're doing in my locals with my unwoke army. Well, it's not my unwoke army, it's our unwoke army. It's not just me. But one of the things I've been thinking about a lot in terms of like getting people to actually do things to fight back is the personal development part of it is actually critical in making sure people have the right mindset and the right perspective, and they're taking mostly because like I want them to take care of themselves, but I also want people, when they're speaking up and expressing themselves, like going to school board meetings and giving a speech, or even just asking questions in their job or what have you, I want them to know that their personal power comes from inside of them, kind of regaining that internal kind of like locus of control. Because
Mhm.
I think what I see going on is so many people are looking outside of themselves for validation, and when we look outside of ourselves for validation, that is inherently going to facilitate us making emotional decisions, because we're hinging our decision. I mean, like you just said with the pipeline, they don't want to admit that Trump was right. They are hinging what should be a very logical, rational decision on whether or not someone's going to credit Trump. That
Right.
to me is not a reasonable thing. And
Right.
so I think that a key part of kind of regaining our footing in the culture war is to help people understand that you don't need that outside validation, that you can give yourself the validation that you might be looking for in other people. So that's something I've been thinking about quite a bit. What do you think about that?
Well, I refer to the dynamics that you're talking about as ego strength. Ego
Mm,
ego strength is a sense, the reasonable sense of who you are, what you're capable of doing, what you're certain about, what you're weak about. And it's a really healthy assessment of who you are, but a part of that is agency. And I was talking before about this real concern I have that people, get a sense of learned helplessness.
Yes.
Okay. And ego strength is, the aspects of good, healthy ego strength isn't a person who feels helpless in their situation. Because of infrastructure, it's easy, there's that old saying, you can't fight City Hall. And the idea is that it's such a bureaucracy and there's so many, or even red tape but with the complexities of society, there's a necessity for bureaucracies. But all these bureaucracies are destined to get corrupted because somebody's got to run those bureaucracies. And there's a part of running a bureaucracy where it makes a lot of sense to say, well, let's just do this, let's just do that. Well, we don't think that everyone's going to like that. Well, they don't have a say. We're going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sort of dictatorial kinds of things. And you can make an argument that to do a few of those things might be very practical and you can get them done, but you've got that slippery slope thing. Like once you sort of do one thing that, you have the authority to do it because you've been given the position. The bureaucrats are stronger than the elected officials, if you think about it, which is, why they refer to the deep state. I mean, these are people who are in positions where they can make decisions. They sort of don't answer to anybody. They don't answer to the electorate. And they could start off with great intentions, but it doesn't take long down the road before now they're doing things that are harmful, not useful to the general public. Only a few people benefit. And then they don't want to give up that power or that control.
Right.
And, the whole idea was elections were part of the way of dealing with that thing. The separations of the branches of government were an attempt to, sort of one oversees the other, but it doesn't work out so well though, because there are ways once bureaucracy gets established that, then the general public looks away. It's just a lot of detail work that people don't have time for. And then, down the road, you get a monster, running people's lives. Right. And you wonder why there's a centralized system that controls your thermostat in your house, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do we get ourselves out of this mess, Howard?
Well, I think
in 45 minutes or less, because we do have our local Zoom to go to later.
Okay.
But so I'm just asking you to solve all the world's problems.
45. Well, look, we have to keep the dialogue going.
Yeah. Okay.
Now it's funny when I sort of got sick of the term. We have to have a dialogue about this. We have to have a dialogue about this. For some of those juicy issues, people were wanting always to have a dialogue. We actually do dialogue a lot. But
we don't listen. We talk. Yeah. We don't listen.
Thank you. You completed what I was getting at. There's a lot of talking going on, but nobody's listening. And again, getting back to that freedom of speech thing, there's too many things being canceled. There's too many. I make a case that if you shut off, hearing what people have to say, you could be shutting off as much as half of the brain trust that there is on an issue. And when I've worked in companies, trying to assess what a company needs and where the problems are and all that kind of stuff, sometimes you get a resistance when you come into a company and they, because you don't know the politics that have been going on and the personalities that are going on. You see it, I'm sure, in your organizational work. And they could either welcome you, or they could do the opposite and think, you know what, you don't know what you're talking about, and all of that. And so there's again with doing a clinical intervention, you have to make a connection. And the connection that I like to make is I want to be good at what I do, but in the room I want to be the least competent person in it.
Hmm.
I want everyone to be all better than I am at what I do. And so I'm not talking about incompetence. I'm just talking about I like working with people who are talented. What we're doing by cutting off speech and getting tribal is we're cutting off the brain trust of information that we need. And so we can assign a goal that we have, the goal of whatever we want to do is not going to be achieved well if you cut off the other side from weighing in to how that goal could be made even better.
Mm-hmm.
We do that all the time because we have tribalism going on. And you know, I think, how often do you get into a discussion where you just say something and someone responds to you by saying, I disagree with that?
Well, responds non-combatively.
Well, yeah, non-combatively. But the first statement is I disagree.
Um, I quite frequently will get into discussions with people who disagree. Oftentimes, like and that's their first response. Oftentimes, though, I have to. It usually ends up being a result of them not actually listening to what I'm saying. So I can't actually classify that as a true disagreement because I'm like, you literally don't even understand the words coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, I'm not. I want to make sure that I'm even asking the question
Yeah,
right. My thing isn't about encountering disagreement. That's fine.
yeah.
Disagreements out there. What I'm trying to address is it's like the knee jerk response, and
Oh yeah, all the time.
yeah, I just disagree. So I would offer this to people who do that all the time. Well, they need to be self reflective. A lot of times people do something they don't know they're doing it, but saying I disagree should not be the first thing you say to anybody. They it sh-
I
if
see
you
where you're
say
going.
yeah, if you say disagree, I disagree, that should come after maybe 15 questions. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that many questions. So the person hears what you have to say, and then internally they disagree. They want to say impulsively say I disagree with you, and say why maybe. But what I'm recommending is they don't say I disagree. They say tell me more. They say, and then or they say, well, would it work in such and such situation? Would you do it this time? Would you do? In other words, ask enough sufficient questions to where once you're going to weigh in, and by the way, there's a way to open the door of weighing in. When you say, well, that's all really interesting. Thank you for telling me you answered my questions. Can I tell you what I think? What I'm saying is that the system, the systematic methodological way of saying you disagree is to ask them if they'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this may seem like tedious. Like, why can't I just say, what do I have to ask? Well, I have a blunt response to that. I'm not going to tell people what I think unless I know that they want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And because your idea, no one cares about your ideas until they say, I'd like to know what you have to say about that. So I don't mind in the interaction that I'm having with anybody is to say, would you like to hear what I have to say? I bring this up. It's funny. I started off with how I work with people I'm supervising. And so people would come to me clinically, and I'd ask them, how can I help you? And they tell me their story and whatever. And then I'd ask my questions. And then I'd say, would you like to hear my response to everything you just said?
Mm-hmm.
Now, why isn't it implied that if they walked into my office, they're paying me money for my time? Why shouldn't I just already know they want to hear what I have to say? And the answer is because they don't until
Yeah.
I find out.
Exactly, and I'll tell you what, like, I've absolutely been in situations where someone is paying me, I mean, thousands of dollars to coach them on something, and they are really not interested in what I have to say at
Right,
all.
right.
And sometimes you know that, and sometimes you don't, and you have to find out through the course of the discussion. But it's like I do think that the act of asking, "Do you want to hear what I have to say?" Even if they don't realize that, you know, there might be an instance where they really like unconsciously are not interested in what you have to say. They've kind of turned their head off to even hearing what you have to say. But if you ask them, do you want to hear what I have to say? That simple act of asking the question can get them to stop and disrupt that thought process, so they will become open to what you have to say.
Yeah, I love your response to my pointing this out, because it's real. You see, their mind is all tied up in whatever it was, and you need to give them something to loosen it with. And you cannot just assume that because they're paying you and because you're an expert and because you had good results with them before, if you ever worked with them before, you cannot assume that they care a whit what you have to say. And isn't that counterintuitive? But I'm pointing it out. I mean, this is not something that you wouldn't expect. You'd expect, if you're having a conversation, one person saying one thing, another person says another thing, and it goes back and forth. No, what it does is it seizes up immediately into tribal thinking, into nuts thinking, into defensive thinking, into, all those things that prevent, whatever direction the goal could possibly be. Here, look, I brought up using for energy reusable clean sources. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what could be wrong with finding something or a few somethings that fit that category, where it's win, 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 and it's environmentally clean and all of that? The idea that somebody's against that, I think it's insulting to think people are against it. People might be against it for now because they don't want to bring the economy down, but they could be for it later if they can smooth into it and the economy doesn't break on the way to the good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard a discussion like this before. I haven't heard a discussion saying, look, my business runs on petrol fuel. If the prices go up, I'm out of business. So I don't give a damn about any of that climate change stuff. So I can understand where this person's coming from. But to open the discussion up is like, if you could snap your fingers and have your vehicles run on something that was renewable and it was clean, would you do it? I'm assuming the person might say absolutely.
Yeah.
Show me where that is. And so, again, it sounds like a tedious discussion. Why can't we just cut to the chase? Sometimes you can't cut to the chase. You got to find out where somebody is. You can't just say that they're climate deniers. You can't just call them names and say that there isn't some good reason, even though you don't like their reasoning, that they shouldn't have that reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
So why should? Yeah.
It's so funny. I was just thinking, as you were talking about that, I was just thinking about how much the left hates Thomas Massey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I absolutely believe that it would not be hard for me to find like some sort of leftist somewhere saying Thomas Massey's like a climate denier and all these things and all sorts of horrible names. That dude's got like a totally green farm.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he has one of the most green like lifestyles that you can have. Like,
Right.
not just for an elected politician, but for like anyone. And I absolutely believe that people assume that he's like a climate denier of some sort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so we have these assumptions and we dive into our, I don't even call them dialogues. They're more diatribes than dialogues about some issue. And, therefore there's not going to be any connective tissue in the discussion. And, I mean, look, there's this term bipartisan. We've all become real aware that the votes for any kind of policy, they play out according on party lines. I mean, almost everything plays out. There's all these laws are being passed that maybe people don't really care about, where there is a lot of bipartisanship. But on the big issues, there tends to be, this party votes this way and this party votes that way. Mm-hmm. And so they consider it bipartisan if one person from the party jumps and votes with the other one.
Right.
And I'm thinking that's a really misuse of the term bipartisan.
Mm-hmm.
That one person out of the other party doesn't mean that, oh, look, everyone likes this idea. So we're hunkered down into this tribal way of doing things, and we're going to suffer from it until we're all destroyed if we don't get out of the tribal way of looking at things. And you can't do that unless you have free speech. You can't do that unless when you approach something that you anticipate is going to be disagreeable, you don't start off with your disagreement. You start off with finding out what the other person really believes.
Mm-hmm.
What do they really care about? I'll speak in a sort of a broad-based way, but where one party wants to make a big deal about the other party being racist, okay? I'm not saying which party. I'm just saying one party wants to make a big deal. Their starting point is the other party is racist.
I think we all know which party you're talking about. That's okay.
Thank you. I need to specify. So imagine the kind of whatever you're going to work out that's really serious. Again, nuts is when you can't be sensible when it's time to be sensible. That's what nuts is. So you start off with the premise that the other side is racist. Now we got to waste our time where the other side says something like, well, we're not. I'm not racist. I'm not racist. Yeah, you are. Look, you did this. What about this rule? What about this procedure? What about that speech? What about this thing that this person said? Now,
and I'll even take it one step farther, because when you do that over and over and over again, the other side goes, well, there's no point in me even trying not to be racist. Then I'm gonna start acting overtly racist just to piss you off.
That's exactly what happens.
Even if they weren't racist in the first place, they actually start to become more racist simply because they've been accused of being racist repeatedly.
Absolutely. And now we're off to the races on something that doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And that's what's being discussed. So that's why my suggestion is, don't start off by putting out the alarm that you disagree with what's going on, and don't assume anything of the other person. Let the other person present who they say they are. Worst case is they're hiding something, or they're exaggerating something, or it's just not true, or it's a lie. But here's the interesting thing about that. If you give a person the space to say who they are, more than likely they're going to be fairly accurate about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's really interesting. You don't have to hurl names at them. If they feel like they're in a conducive circumstance where they have good dialogue and it's healthy, and they're trying to get from point A to point Z, and they're doing it in good faith, they will be very honest with you about their weaknesses. They may take a position, and they may say, yeah, you know what, I'm for this mostly. I know there's a problem with this other thing. And if you, for example, just like gun issues, like you could think like the NRA only thinks what they think. And you can have these opinions and assumptions that, I can't off the top of my head say what the policy issue could be. If there wasn't that kind of tribalism, the NRA might very freely say, we want to do this and this and this and this, but doing that does create a problem with this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
They would be more open with the weaknesses of their position.
Right. If they didn't feel like it was going to be used as a political weapon against them forever and ever and ever and ever. Like, there's no incentive for people admitting that they don't know everything, that they don't have all the answers, that sometimes there might be more nuance to the position than they're letting on.
Yeah.
Like, people know all these things, but they won't admit it because it'll be weaponized against them for the rest of their lives.
That's exactly what happens. And so people do withhold what the weaknesses of their positions are because it'll be weaponized against them. And so how could we be having anything else but this crazy discourse that pits people to plant a flag in one area, to stay only in that area, and they can't move outside of that area
right
for the rest of their lives?
Yeah.
That
is the question.
Well, it's depressing to me. Now, we're having a dialogue. People are your listeners are paying attention to this. And they have to sort out, okay, even if they like the ideas that we're talking about, can they really implement them in their own lives?
Mm-hmm.
This may be very idealistic to have this level of openness, this level of working things out and having dialogue with people without, demonizing each other. And as appealing as that could be, I would imagine there's many who would be paying attention to this discussion who would wonder, sounds fine. How do I implement that in my life?
Well, I will say, and I'm gonna let you offer your suggestions in a sec as we kind of start to wrap up. But I will say, like, I feel like we do this in my locals community. I feel like we do this on our community Zooms where we have constructive dialogue, we have nuanced dialogue. People are able to question each other. I think people are able to admit when they don't know. And so, what I've tried to cultivate in my community is maybe they don't have this any other place in their life where they can have this kind of nuanced, contextual dialogue with people that sometimes they might agree with, sometimes they might disagree with, but at least they have that place where they can have that dialogue. And so if all else fails, they can come to the community Zoom and say what they want to say. And sometimes people will agree with them and sometimes they won't. And oftentimes people ask questions about it and all that sort of thing. So I think from my perspective, the first thing that needs to happen in order for us to build a society in which, that type of dialogue is possible again, and who knows at this point if it even ever was. I have questions about that. But, it's like people have to take it upon themselves to engage in that type of dialogue. This is not something we can change, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this isn't something we can change on a collective level. This is something that has to be changed on an individual level, and maybe practicing in small groups will be able to help people to go out into the world and do that in other contexts that aren't just like my local Zoom. Am I off base?
No, you're right. You see, the interesting thing is because this fight of the individual and the collective, the thing is that there has to be a healthy collective and there has to be healthy individuals, and there's got to be interplay between the two. And it's precisely what you were just talking about. Because without that, you drift into that learned helplessness. So, so someone could say, like, well, God, how can we deal with this? Because we laid out some pretty serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's been intractable for generations, if not throughout the history of the world. Okay, and now we come into the world at this time in history, and it's like, who the hell are we to make any kind of inroad to making things shift? And the answer is, well, we're we. They're you and I, and so what can we do about it? We're doing it now. This is what we do about it. We have a long form discussion on these things. I have insecurities about not being as precise and as fluid and on target as I possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it's hard to be that way. That's why I need a longer discussion so I can meander into maybe an area and I go, not so much, draw it back, refine it. I'm sorry, what you tell
No,
you?
I was just gonna say, like, in hearing you talk about like how you struggle with that, I think one of the things I've thought about an awful lot is how, I mean, frankly, sad it is that we can't do things like wonder out loud or brainstorm or spitball or just
Yes,
throw ideas, and they may be stupid ideas and they may prove out to be stupid ideas
yeah.
when you actually have a chance to talk them through. But if you can't even wonder at, like, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if I tried this stupid thing over here? Like, I feel like all hope is lost if we can't do those things.
It's what I strive to do is, I realize, well, first of all, I'm always grateful for the time that you allow for this. I
Mhm.
also am very aware. I mean, this is not like a 10-minute soundbite. We're going
That was
on.
a 2-hour discussion,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a 2-hour discussion, and you think to yourself, well, why can't you get the thing resolved in 2 hours? I mean, don't you got your ideas all worked out? And the answer is, yeah, I got a lot of them worked out, but you know what? They're not always easy to express. And sometimes I get into my own way, and sometimes I meander into this area. So the long form interview allows, assuming that we're on target enough, um, that it allows us to flush out exactly the kind of thing that we don't see a lot. And so this is the answer to the question. The answer is this kind of civilized discussion where I want to be challenged in my ideas. It's actually easier for me to when you say that you agree with what I'm talking about. First of all, I take you at face value. I think you do.
Mhm.
I think I've made strong cases. But I can go on and I'll hit an area where you'll say, hopefully after this discussion, you won't say it right away. You won't say, I disagree. You might ask some questions about that. Then you'd say, we want to hear what I have to say about that? I say, I know it's all
Mm-hmm.
good manners. And I say, yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And you'd say, okay, here's the problem I have with what you said, and it doesn't make sense. And I want to resolve this. I want to get this thing discussed. I want to make sure that I heard you correctly. I want to make sure that I understand this. I want to make sure I can be as smart and as wise on the subject as possible. That's all I'm asking for from people. I guess it's a lot, because people don't readily do it, do they?
Yeah.
It's not human nature to sound this way. And that it goes to another area. I consider myself an expert in communication. I do conflict resolution. And what I point out that people in their natural state do not communicate very effectively.
No, not at all.
Yeah, they don't do that, and because it's not natural. And what's natural is to be defensive, is to express your disagreements with things, and go for it. The problem is it won't get you to what I consider the desired places that most people want to get to. What's going on in any discussion and any positions that people are taking, political or otherwise, is there's in a matrix, there's three factors. One is truth, the other is context, and the third one is values.
Mm-hmm.
Truth, context, and values. And I want to be clear what I mean by truth. Truth isn't that particular arena isn't necessarily truth. It could be anything along the continuum from a complete lie and distortion to truth. So everybody is somewhere on that spectrum on a particular issue. They, whether they're informed about something or not, or whatever, they come up with something that where they wind up, they either know they're lying or they know they're telling the truth or whatever. So when I say truth, I'm not saying, truth only. I'm saying the spectrum of what is real or not.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is context. Okay, let me give you a dramatic, horrible example of context. If I said to you, this person took a knife out and stabbed this other person,
Mm-hmm.
and it was truthful, that person had a knife and they stabbed another person, you'd go, wow, that's a big deal. Context would be that what they were doing was they were defending, they stabbed a person that was holding a baseball bat because they were going to hit, a defenseless child.
Right. That's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. So you can see that you can't just have truth that tells you anything. You have to have the truth somewhere on the, continuum of what's going on. You have to have context. And then, I actually just tried to go with those two as the big formative things. Those two that can't quite live in the space that they need to without the idea of values.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a sense of values, things they care about and things they don't care about. And when that's what you're up against whenever you're talking to anybody about anything, you're talking about those elements: truth, context, and values.
Truth, context, and values. Well, I think that's as good a place as any to kind of start to wrap it up for today, Howard. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure to hit on before we conclude?
Thanks for the time, as always.
Yeah.
This is a pitch. I would like people to get the book, read it. I think they'll enjoy it. I'm getting good feedback on it. It's interesting. While I like to talk about it, there's a part of me that says, well, all those questions you're asking, it's in the book. It's in the book. It's in the book. Yeah. And that's a good thing. And so much more is actually discussed in the book than just what we went over. Mm-hmm. But the elements that we went over are definitely of the backdrop of why I think these things are important. And I think this too. I think it's an extraordinary time in history, like all times are. I mean, on the one hand, what makes it any different? Every generation has a responsibility to do something with the time that they come into. And I am constantly worried that we'll lose these opportunities to do things that will do the most good for the most amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big lift, but every generation has that as a responsibility. That's why I wrote the books.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to having book club in my locals community. Everyone, well, not everyone, but many people in my locals are currently reading Howard's book. I would invite all of you guys to order Howard's book as well. And then the great thing about this timing is on March 26th, you can come and enjoy a private Zoom call with Howard. I know you guys in the chat are talking about how you love this conversation so much. On the private Zoom call, you're going to be able to talk to Howard directly, ask him any questions. We're going to discuss his book in the context of the times that we're living in. So that is available exclusively for my local supporters. Now, of course, anyone can order the book, and I would encourage everyone to head over to Amazon or whatever website you please and pick up a copy of it regardless. But if you can talk to the author of it, I mean, why not? Might as well. So the way you get access to that is by becoming a supporter in my locals community. You can do that for $5 a month. For this week only, you can do it for $45 for the year, which is going to give you 3 months for free. Usually it's $50 for the year and you get 2 months for free, but we're doing 3 months for free just for this week only because I really want to encourage everyone to become a member, and I really want to hit 100 new supporters before my birthday in about a month on April 12th. And if you sign up and become a member, not only are you going to be able to come to the book club with Howard in a couple weeks, but in about 15 minutes, if you're free, if you're available, you can join us for a private community Zoom call. We're going to be getting started at around 7 o'clock, and that is available for all supporters in my locals. We also do these Zoom calls on Wednesdays. We do them on Monday and Wednesdays every single week. We have other things going on as well. So make sure you become a member in my locals, and I really appreciate all the support. It makes it possible to do the work I'm doing. Now, we got a couple more things coming up this week. Tomorrow, I will be going live at 5 just for a solo stream. I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about yet because we're going to have to see what's going on in the world, but I will be talking about something. I promise you that. So that'll be tomorrow at 5 on the channel. And then on Tuesday, we have on Tuesday, tomorrow's Tuesday as it turns out, but I have 2 streams on Tuesday. We get a twofer because I also have my regular show with Joshua at 9:30. It's called Nothing Remotely Controversial. It's a fun show. Joshua's a psychic. Joshua is a psychic, and so he comes and does his psychic thing, and we predict what's going to go on in the news. And so if you never read Nothing Remotely Controversial, even if you don't believe in psychics, I promise you it's a fun time. And then, of course, on Wednesday, we're not going live at 5 because we're going live at 6:15 for Spy Stream. So we got our next Spy Stream. Spy Stream is a fun event where we infiltrate a woke public training of some sort. We're going to be watching a training from the Center for Anti-Racist Education, and they're going to be telling us, excuse me, how to integrate anti-racist education into the curriculum, even though they will all claim that critical race theory is not being taught in schools. So we're going to be doing that on Wednesday on the channel. If you enjoyed this conversation with Howard, I hope you will consider mounting that like button for me, and I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. Howard is a regular. And of course, make sure you join us for book club, and you're going to get a chance to talk to Howard directly. Howard, where can people connect with you online?
My website is dr-howard-asher at .com. That's my website.
Yeah. And you can connect with Howard on there. You can, I think, follow him on Twitter. I think you can order both of his books on dr-howard-asher.com. And I would encourage you to do so. Howard is a wonderful writer, and I know people in my locals are already enjoying his book. All right, guys, that's all we have for right now. I got to go grab some food in about 10 minutes before we get started with our locals community Zoom call. But to everyone in my locals, I will see you very soon. Howard, thank you again for joining me today, and let's do it again soon, all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for the time.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.